is coming up on 10:30, well, 10:30 my time. So for those that have joined, we want to welcome you to this panel talking about a very pertinent topic, the future of the supply chain. I know before we started, some of the panelists were already making some comments about some of the challenges and perhaps opportunities that we see with the supply chain. So for this session, it will be 50 minutes in duration. There will be a close-off for the entire Unified Power of Unified session. So after the session finishes, we do encourage everybody to go back to the lobby and join the main session afterwards. The structure for this panel is that there will be a series of Q&As that our moderator, Lionel, will kind of walk us through. If you have questions that you think of or that you want to ask the panel, you are welcome to drop them in the chat so that way we can have a bit of a queue and we'll surface that towards the end. And there may also be an opportunity for you to unmute and ask your question live as well, but we will reserve that portion towards the end. So I'll try to keep us on time and maybe give us a 5-minute warning whenever we get close to 20 past the hour. But without further ado, I would like to hand off to Lionel, and you can do the introductions of our panelists. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Excellent. So thank you, Heidi. My name is Lionel Descombes. I'm director of CGI Supply Chain Innovation Center in Lyon, in France. And I'm very pleased today to welcome all of you into this discussion around the future of supply chain. So as an introduction, let me give you a little bit of context to introduce this panel discussion. So pressures due to geopolitical disruption, bounce back from pandemic and shortages of raw materials are all causing strain on the global supply chain. So we're here today to discuss what the future of supply chains holds for manufacturers and how they can best prepare for success. So I'm joined today by supply chain experts. We have John Kennedy, CEO at the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program. We have Dr. Ted Stank from the Global Supply Chain Institute at University of Tennessee, and Pascal Zamit and Dilip Nair, both supply chain experts at CGI. So first, I invite each panelist to give a brief introduction and their perspective on the future of the supply chain. So let's start from John.
Thank you, Lionel. John Kennedy, NJMEP. I spent most of my career owning engineering and manufacturing companies and working for a lot of big guys, including Ted in your background, FedEx, and doing a lot of work there. My engineering degree is in mechanical, which I love, but my PhD's in industrial because supply chain became. And I'm excited. I like working with the CGI folks, very experienced, and thank you.
Pascal?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Pascal Zamit. My name is Pascal Zamit. I'm Senior Advisor, Supply Chain and Logistics for CGI in France, for CGI France. And I'm in charge to manage the supply chain practice for this country. I'm also professor at the University Panthéon-Assas in supply chain and logistics. My background is mainly in automotive industry and as a former Michelin Chief Supply Chain Officer.
Thanks very much, Pascal, for this introduction. Let's move to Ted.
Thanks, Lionel, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ted Stank. I'm a professor of supply chain management at University of Tennessee and the faculty advisor and director to our Global Supply Chain Institute. I've worked for many years with companies from across the industry spectrum, many global companies as well, and have seen a a lot of changes in 30 plus years. I started working in industry first as in operations in the U.S. Navy, and then with Abbott Laboratories before I went into academia. And I've spent my career really working closely with a lot of companies to see a lot of these changes. So this is a very exciting topic.
Yeah. I guess we've lost the connection with Ted. Ted, are you back? Ted, we have lost the last few seconds of your presentation.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm not sure where I ended off, so it probably wasn't that important, Lionel. Let's move on.
Great. So thanks anyway for your presentation. Let's finish with Dilip.
Thanks, Lionel. My name is Dilip Nair. I'm Vice President with CGI, focused on manufacturing and retail in the U.S. My focus over the last many years has been the intersection of supply chain sustainability and technology, right? And that's been an evolving field and a very, very exciting field. And I continue to work with a number of our customers around these areas, right? Both from an advisory perspective, but also, working internally within CGI in terms of how different pieces of the ecosystem kind of intersect with these problem areas that are cropping up. Thank you.
Excellent. So thanks very much for the time taken for this presentation. Let's start now with the first topics or the first question to our panelists. And the first topics is about supply chain resiliency. So we have heard a lot about resiliency, but what do we actually mean when we talk about supply chain resiliency, and how do manufacturers start to achieve that? Do they find what are the obstacles that they have to face as supply chain become more and more complex? And what does that mean when we talk about future of the supply chain? So I'm pretty sure that Ted, you have a first view on this point.
Yeah, Lionel, again, this has become a topic that is emerging in importance for every company. And we've worked in it for many years. I would define it first off as the ability for an organization to continue business as usual, despite what might happen in their demand environment or their supply environment, or internally for that matter. Or if they do have a drop off in performance because of some kind of disruption, how quickly can they get back to previous business conditions and output? Obviously, through COVID, we have learned of all kinds of risks of disruptions that we may not have thought were going to happen. And I think in terms of how manufacturers start to achieve that, just like several years ago, sales and operations planning became a core process in supply chain management for manufacturers. I believe that risk management, if it is not a dynamic, important process today, must become one. My experience has been that a lot of companies will execute a risk management plan once a year. They'll bring a bunch of people together to headquarters. They'll think about all the things that might happen and what's the likelihood of that happening and what things can they do if they happen. And they come up with a really nice white paper or PowerPoint, and they put it on the shelf and think about it again next year. And I think the events of the last 2 years have convinced us that this needs to be a living, breathing process that we pay a lot of attention to. In terms of obstacles, we have seen them in the last 2 years in every facet of a manufacturer's operations, from changing demand from one product category to another. For example, in consumer packaged goods, from things that were sold through stores to things that we can buy online, institutional products, things that go through hotels and concert arenas and sports stadiums, to things that are more consumer usage. So major changes in demand. At the same time, we saw major changes in our supply base, not only our goods suppliers, but our service providers, whether that's ocean transportation or domestic rail and trucking transportation. And we just saw disruptions in everything. And not only in our first tier of who we buy from, but in our second and third and fourth tier when our first tier suppliers couldn't get product. And we're seeing that today with the shutdown still in Shanghai. We may think our supply base of who we buy from is secure, but they can't get products because some of their suppliers are all located in areas that are having disruption. And then the third major one I would suggest that we have to pay attention to is labor. Again, we realized during the early days of COVID in particular, John, you mentioned this before we kicked off officially, but many places in the world shut down and kept people at home for fear of spreading COVID, a legitimate fear. But what that did was prevent us from bringing in the key personnel into operational facilities to get the job done. And of course, the result of that was going to be product scarcity, all kinds of disruptions. And in the U.S. today, we're seeing that we can't get baby formula on the shelves because of shutdowns in the supply chain. So, it hit us across the board. And in terms of moving forward, we need to be much more conscious and dynamic about risk management and figuring out how to either avoid those risks, which is difficult to do, or to better manage those risks and understand that those things are going to continue to happen. And we need to have the agility in our supply chain to be able to move when different disruptions occur.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ted, for that. Does you have any other view, or do you all agree with what has been said by Ted?
I think fully in agreement with
Excuse me, I have a couple. Dilip, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, resilience is the new mantra, right? It's a new mantra from everyone, right? So I think just the last 2 years has shifted the focus away from pure efficiency, right, to resiliency, right? And resiliency and efficiency are not necessarily always intertwined, right? It is about risk mitigation rather than about driving out costs and trying to find the cheapest supplier or the cheapest way to procure a supply.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And
Dilip.
just to Ted's point, Ted, made the mention about COVID, and to me, a lot of these problems existed for decades. COVID just brought it out to us. So, think about the steel and aluminum shortage that tariffs brought on, right? U.S. doesn't manufacture as much anymore of those things. So it's very interesting where you go with some of these things, whether it's food or anything else. Talk about Wall Street Journal earlier, Ted. They had an article about that 95% of U.S. blood pressure medicine comes from China.
Yeah.
And 50% of adults need blood pressure medicine. That's just bad business. You're not blaming China or anybody. That's just bad business. So I think a lot of what Ted said and Dilip added to is very relevant.
Yeah, I totally agree, John. Raise your hand on this panel if we couldn't have talked 10 years ago that at some point in the world global supply chain, we weren't going to have issues with rushing 95% of our supply of anything to one country. Doesn't matter what country that is, right? We could have all foreseen this, and yet for reasons that Dilip brought up about efficiency, we rushed to that anyway.
Thanks, Ted. You want to add something, Pascal, or shall we move to the next theme or question?
It's okay. What I would like to say, it's in fact, unfortunately, I think we have collectively demonstrated that our strategic planning, it's not really effective in many companies due to the fact that we were incapable to anticipate and with a strong strategic sourcing, etc., etc. This is where a lot of effort has to be put in place, and but this will be in will have effect in midterm. And in addition, with a resilient supply chain, we have also the problem of the planet, which is a huge issue, and this means that a lot of supply chain has to be redesigned in order to totally rebalance the way we source the things, with much more capabilities to support a VUCA world, and also to find a solution in order to better manage the impact on the planet. Now, this is clearly one of the key top agenda of each CEO, I think, in many companies.
So thanks, Pascal, for your answer. So let's now move to the next question, which is much more about technology, talent, and expertise. So technology becoming more and more data-driven today could empower manufacturers to become leaders in supply chain management. However, our last voice of customers data suggests that they lack the relevant skills here. So what is your position on this? What talent should manufacturers be planning for the supply chain of the future? John, interesting topic for you?
Yeah, I mean, the MEP system is a national network, and every state in Puerto Rico has one. And we're not government agencies, but we work very closely with NIST, the National Institute of Standard and Technology. So everything to them is technology, everything to them is data. But the dumb engineer in me goes back to certain things with regards to the fact that the average manufacturer in New Jersey is 34 people. The average manufacturer across the country of the United States is 33 people. So when a lot of us talk about this mega data and the usage of it and higher tech and Industry 4.0, we're talking about companies much larger. We look at, Ted brought up Abbott Labs and the situation that they're going through with the baby formula. We're looking at these, but the reality is that the supply chain lies in these smaller companies, and we don't spend enough time, energy, effort, or money investment working with them. That's something that the CGI folks and I have talked about to see what we can do, because New Jersey is a supply chain state. We have 11,000 manufacturers, a lot of manufacturers, life sciences, and so on. And it's something that gets lost, on us, because when we think of manufacturing, we think of that huge, Ford plant or Toyota plant or whatever it might be. We don't think of Triangle Manufacturing, who actually makes a lot of the knee and hip replacements, and you've never heard of them. And that's the reality. As far as labor is concerned, labor is evolving. But the big problem, at least in the United States, is that there's no pipeline for labor. We're not producing enough engineers. We're not producing enough machinists, welders, and so on. It's not a good pipeline. So we have to figure that out. And when we talk about the labor of today, when we talk about a machinist or a welder, we're talking about high-tech jobs. They're not, some guy, beating on a piece of steel in the back of a room. These are high-tech jobs. So in order for the supply chain to be effective, we've got to have an effective pipeline.
Okay, thanks, John, for this. Any other comments on this question?
I'll jump in as an educator. Of course, we're talking more about the management level, and I think there needs to be a lot more talk about the hourly level employee. But we, for the last several years, have seen an increased interest in supply chain kind of areas. for employment, in both in industrial engineering, as you suggest, John, as well as in operations management in the business school. At the University of Tennessee, we actually have the largest undergraduate major in supply chain management and operations in the whole state of Tennessee. And that is like dramatically different from when I first got to Tennessee 20 years ago, because I think people are starting to recognize that there's jobs there and opportunities there. That said, that's a drop in the bucket of what industry really needs, and that's not addressing this hourly employee crisis that I think that all industrialized companies are staring down at. And John, you brought up the issue that COVID kind of magnified trends that had been there for a long time, and I think one of the biggest crises that we have to deal with, whether that's through national policy or industry incentives, is how do we attract skilled people into those kinds of trades that will get them the skill set they need to succeed in a manufacturing environment in this digital world. I think it's nothing short of a crisis that we are somewhat ignoring.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point of view. Would like to add this question to Pascal. It is what has been discussed is also a trend in France, I mean, or in Europe more globally?
Well, more or less, yes. More or less, I think it's exactly it's more or less the same thing. What I would like to add on the question about people. Okay, of course, the size of the factories, the number of people we have in the factories, it's really, really important. Okay, but there are some key figures we have to have in mind on the leap that the world is going to do in terms of work on people in the coming years. If I take the OECD figures, okay. There is an estimation by 2030 that 1.1 billion of people will have to change their job due to introduction of new technology. Mm. If I take a second one, which is I love because I'm a professor also, and I think Ted, okay, the World Economic Forum is publishing a strong study every year, okay, about people. And by 2020, they are saying that 2025, 88 millions of jobs will be displaced, but 97, which is more, will be created. And this represents 6% of the workforce in the world. And this is clearly one of the key elements we have to take into account as leaders in supply chain. How are we going to manage that? Because new technology are clearly changing the way that the people are going to operate their job. On the even the hourly people on the shop floor and also in the white collar in the nice office. Okay, and this is clearly a strong shift. And the problem behind that, and one of the key things we need to address is the way that managers are going to help people to make the change properly. And this is clearly where I think there is a big leap, a big shift in the way we can transform managers to leaders, able to be confident and to make the change. It's a question also of competitiveness. Okay, if you don't do, you probably lose. And the question we have is for the small companies, the tier 3, tier 2, tier 1 of the big manufacturer, how they are going to transform themselves to face to this huge human resources leap.
Excellent.
It's not a technical issue, it's a management issue.
Excellent. So it's kind of a good transition to the next question, which is about agility. Much of the discussion seems to point the ability to be truly agile. And how can you make sure you can make the right decision at the right time. This is one of the key questions. And how can manufacturers empower people close to the field to take the correct action? So, and what is the role of the data to achieve this goal? So it's kind of carry on the answer you were providing, Pascal. So I'll let you carry on this one.
Okay, thanks. And you know that it's one of my favorite topics. Okay. Now, for me, one of the key things in supply chain, in order to be capable to address to a volatile market, to a VUCA world, I think what is key is to be capable to take decision very quickly. If you can reduce, supply chain is a question of cycle time, okay? More you have a quick cycle time, more you are able to have a strong supply chain. After it's a question of trade-off, etc. It's exactly the same thing for the decision-making process. And then when I learn a lot of study about that, the way to be sure that you take good decision, a quick decision, is to be capable to take the decision as close as you can, close from where the decision has to be taken, the ground. And my point is we need to change totally the way we organize the global supply chain organization. In general, we in the past, and I did that, okay, I create a central team in charge to think, etc., with APS, so technical solution, SAP, you put in a system, then you calculate, etc., etc. But at the end, this is very nice, but you are in fact putting distance between the ground and where the people are taking decisions. The question for me, the challenge, is to be capable to take decision as close as we can from the ground. The best supply chain is when you have nothing to do. Everything is perfect. For me, the goal of a chief supply chain officer is to play golf every day, okay? But it's never happened, okay? It's never happened. It's never happened. But this is the problem. So the question is, it's how you put the people close from the ground, in a factory, in a customer service, in a purchasing department, capable to take the right decision at the right time. So you need to review the leadership, the model of management. So you need to give them the data in order to take the right decision, sometimes to give them some tools in order to help them on data insight, metrics, etc., etc. And the white collar on top of the ground are, in fact, no more designing, but they are in charge to help people from the ground to take the right decision. And this is a total shift on the way you manage supply chain. Because at the end, the chief supply chain officer is no more in command and control system. He is more at, I am working for my ground team and make them confident and able to take decision by themselves. And this is a total shift of management. By doing that, you accelerate your supply chain and you are much more resilient in face of volatile and VUCA world.
Thank you, Pascal, for
my recommendation.
Any other view on this point about agility and the ability to make the right decision at the right time?
Well, Pascal, I got to leave now. I got a tea time for golf. So Pascal said I could go. But I think he hit the nail on the head with a lot of what he was saying. And here's some of the thought processes. I've been working very closely with NIST and also with Senator Menendez from New Jersey on a national supply chain database tool and how it interacts. And I say this because when we talk about data and we talk about empowering our people and our labor to make decisions, The fact is what we found out during COVID is we don't know who the hell's in our data, in our supply chain. We really don't. You know, I've spent most of my career working in this area in New Jersey, and we have a MEP, NJMEP has a 9,000 plus company database. But when we were looking for PPE, I would have told you 2.5 years ago that no company made PPE in New Jersey. What I found out was that 287 made, because we don't know what's in our data, in our supply chain. And that is a problem for all of us. Local, global, whatever you want it, state to state. If we don't know who can produce what, then we get into the problems of China producing 95% of one item, because I don't blame them. That's good business for them. It's just not good business for the rest of us. So we look at that. And going back to, you know, the labor point, and Ted made some, you know, excellent points, and glad to see the growth in supply chain and that type of stuff. But I'll give you an example. In New Jersey, there's about 40,000 open manufacturing jobs right now. The average manufacturing job in New Jersey pays $97,000 a year. So that's a career path. And the Wall Street Journal, again, Ted and I have been reading it, both of us, obviously. They had an article in November saying that 60% of us do not graduate from a 2-year or 4-year school in the United States. 60% of us. So we need all these skills, and we need to tie in. And Pascal, I'll meet you at the first tee in about 10 minutes.
Thank you, John, for this. Do you want to add something else, Dilip or Ted, or shall we move to the next question?
No, I think both Pascal and John really covered all the aspects of the topic, right? And so the only thing that I wanted to point out is, right, the supply chains, it's not just data, right? You know, just supply chains themselves generate so much data, right? And today, I don't think any of the organizations really do much with that data, right? You know, it remains as data, it doesn't become information or insights, you know, and I think to become an agile organization, right? I think one of the key things that organizations have to start looking at is, what is the data that my supply chain is generating? You know, how am I capturing it? How am I gathering it? How am I interpreting it? And how am I using that to make decisions, right, at all levels? I think that's going to be critical for the future of supply chain.
Thanks, Dilip, for that. Before jumping to the next question, this is a message for all the viewers. About this discussion. So please feel very free to ask your questions right in the chat room, and we'll be very happy to answer them. So next and last question, it's about sustainability. So we have been talking about it when we were answering the first question. So a lot have been said about, you know, supply chains becoming more and more sustainable to reduce, you know, climate impact. But what does this really mean for a supply chain leader? And what are the main obstacles in achieving these sustainability goals? So Dilip, do you want to take this one?
No, absolutely. I think this is certainly a topic close to my heart. You know, it's interesting, both sustainability and supply chain kind of have become, I would say, the trending topics, right? You know, over the last couple of years, and they are both intertwined, right? So there is increasing expectations, right, from consumers, from legislators, from investors, to look at, you know, environmental and social, regulation, social issues, right? To be addressed by large organizations and manufacturers. And fortunately or unfortunately, supply chains sit right in the middle of it, right? You know, supply chains are both cause of challenges with the climate, you know, but are also impacted by the climate, right? So it makes a lot of business sense, right, for supply chains to look at sustainability. So looking at it from two aspects, right? You know, let's look at it from a climate change aspect. So you are seeing today, right? There is India banned the import of wheat or export of wheat from India, and we have a war going on, and that's causing, now suddenly we have a shortage of a food product, right? That probably goes into the supply chain of a number of other products, right? It's a classic example of in real life how climate change is starting to climate change along with geopolitical issues are starting to impact the supply chains. But at the other end of the spectrum, is the mining of rare earth metals that goes into semiconductors, right? So now you're looking at a different problem where the supply chain is causing environmental issues all the way from in far off countries that we don't even know of, in their quest for material, and supplies. So as supply chain leaders, how do we handle both of these, right? I think and Dr. Ted and John talked about resiliency, right? Sustainability is also very closely tied to resiliency at the end of the day, right? It's also tied to Pascal's comment about talent shortage, right? From ESG initiatives, right? For example, participation of women in the supply chain, right? How do you increase the participation of women? How do you make it more attractive for marginalized communities to participate more in the local supply chains? Because it has both two impacts, right? One, those communities are the ones who are most impacted by the negative aspects of supply chain. But the second thing is they can also help make these supply chains more sustainable, right? The third aspect of it is just data, right? How do you leverage all the data that the supply chain is generating to start looking at how your supply chain is impacting the various sustainability aspects, right? Whether it is carbon footprint, or whether it is impact on marginalized communities somewhere else, or impact on just climate, right? In terms of what are you doing, and then the second part of it is using the same data to understand how all these other factors impact your own supply chain, right? So I think this is going to be I think this is pretty much the future of supply chain, right? I think if you have to look at resiliency, you have to look at agility, you have to look at talent shortages. I think the supply chain organizations, supply chain leaders will have to really take a close look at how sustainable their own supply chains are.
Thanks, Dilip, for this. Who else want to add an opinion on these strategic topics and about sustainability in the supply chain?
I think we have a unique opportunity in supply chain because particularly in a manufacturing supply chain, a manufacturer employs the most people, has the most input from a material standpoint, from an energy standpoint, et cetera, of any other part of the organization. And so improvements that we make from an efficiency standpoint, for example, in how we route and move our products, how we manage energy in a manufacturing plant, how we manage wastewater, et cetera, all has impact on our efficiency and therefore bottom line, and also has major impact on the environment, et cetera. So I think if supply chain can lead our organizations, we have an opportunity to make really major impact, not only economically, but also from an environmental standpoint and a sustainability standpoint. Dilip also brought up the issue of equity and diversity. And again, since we employ so many people, we have the opportunity to make major impact in that particular area. And we need it, going back to our conversation on labor earlier, right?
Thank you.
Maybe can I add something at another angle, okay? Something different. For one of the big obstacle that I think supply chain leaders and the people will have to address is it's clearly how we can optimize the delivery to customers, okay? Especially for smart cities. There is some figures which are incredible. In France, for example, you have 1 truck on 4 which are running on the road empty. Okay? We are at the limit of the optimization that each company can do by himself but itself in order to optimize the truck. This doesn't mean that the companies are not optimizing their transport. TMS, transport planning system, using 3PL, 4PL, whatever, okay? The question is it normal to have in multiple, on the same street in each city to have the light truck from UPS, one from FedEx, blah, 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 coming at the same, is it normal that at one POS, point of sales, you have the truck from Michelin, the truck from Continental, one from Goodyear coming, etc., 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 and they are all not full. Due to the fact that also the business requirement coming, the level of service expected by the consumer are higher and higher due to the new type of life we have in the world. But for me, we have no other choice to develop sharing a new system, logistics system, fostering the sharing on means, okay, like warehouse pooling, etc., etc., etc. Frankly, if industrial retailers are not capable to work together as an ecosystem in order to address these issues, I think someone will do it. Someone else. JD.com, Alibaba, Amazon, Uber, I don't know. But someone who is knowing very well properly what is going on in cities today. Someone capturing data every day. Okay? And this is clearly one of the key challenges we have, because this means that industrial retailers will have to work together in order to work in competition. Competition means competition and cooperation. And this is clearly difficult. This is clearly a big challenge. And this will require from supply chain teams in a retailer side or in the industrial side or wholesaler side, etc., will require a clear shift in mindset, leadership, and for me, as a citizen of the world, it's a question of democracy. Because at the end, if this company are not capable to manage that, someone will do it, and this someone could be in some countries the state, which is not democracy, that is clear, or could be another type of non-democracy, which is more driven by companies. Donc, this is for me a big aspect, and time is running because we cannot continue to have noise in cities, CO2 emission, etc., etc. And this is clearly a key challenge we will have to address.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for this insight. We're 10 minutes to the end of this session. I would like to give the opportunity to ask questions from the chat. So do not hesitate to ask questions. I maybe have, one last question about, the fact, are we witnessing the pivot from global to local supply chains? And if so, how manufacturers are making this transition?
Well, I think supply chains have always been local, period. Because when you got so many small companies, you have to start local, and it's supportive. You're talking about sustainability and so on. You don't want to truck something in. At the same time, depending on what you're looking for, and depending on what you make, you've got to look for it. That might, in the United States, that might look New Jersey to Texas. It might look New Jersey to France. It might look, whatever that is. And that's the knowledge of understanding the actual supply chain. But when I owned my company and I needed anodizing, I didn't want to go to Pennsylvania. I wanted to go, 6 miles away to a facility. You've got to use common sense and the sustainability portion of it. I just wanted to, Dilip hit the nail on the head for me at least, is that we tend not to pay attention really to most of what it is. We talk a lot about these things, but we like to demonize. Somebody that drives a gas-fired car is a demon, but everybody that buys a Tesla, they're wonderful to this, yet what is the damage to the environment for 1,000-pound Tesla battery? I'm not knocking Tesla. I'm just saying the footprint is huge. So we've got to figure some of these things out and work together, as Pascal mentioned, to try to figure some of this stuff out, and we just don't. And I'll just use the United States as an example. One of the things that we could do that would tremendously reduce our carbon footprint is not to idle our cars. Every one of us that drives a car in the United States cannot idle their car. Shut it off when you go into the delicatessen to get the coffee or whatever. But we won't do that because we want our car warm or cool or whatever. So until we decide what's really good and what's really bad and that we can work together, it doesn't work because sustainability is somebody else's fault. It's big oil's fault, or it's the power company's fault, but it's not my fault. And that's something that mentality we've got to change. And I blame Tennessee. Sorry, Ted. I thought I was putting Ted to sleep, so I figured I'd wake him up.
Fair enough, John.
Excellent. So we have now just 5 minutes left. So I propose to carry on, and I just would like to now wrap up the discussion by asking to all of you, what is your key message for the manufacturing community? What key action can they take on the next Monday morning to ensure so they have the right roadmap for the supply chain of the future? So I give you the ball for each of you for 1 minute. So it's a challenge. You want to start on this?
Okay, I'll start. There are probably too many initiatives than any one person could even think about on Monday morning, and so maybe just don't think about them and go golfing with Pascal. But given that that's probably not the alternative, I would say that maybe the biggest thing that we could start on Monday morning is the labor issue, and contact your local vocational school. In the United States, we call them community colleges. Work with them if you're an organization to try to put together programs to develop skills for the kind of things that you're going to need in the future. Work with your secondary education providers to try to find that pipeline of people. And perhaps, particularly, John, what you said has really resonated with me, because I always work with the big global companies. And for you to say that the average manufacturer in the United States has 33 employees just hit me like a punch in the face. And had you not said that, I would have talked about other things like global network design and, inventory repositioning or something like that. But I think what you said made me really realize that this is a big issue for a lot of small companies. And I think that the labor issue is one that they might be able to address the most quickly, working with the available educational institutions to try to ensure that they have a pipeline of the right skills.
Thanks, Ted. John, do you want to add something on the key message you should bring to the community, the manufacturing community?
Well, I think Pascal said it the best. He says we got to pay attention and we got to work together, and I think that's something that we have to overcome. To Ted's point is, this is, we need groups like CGI and our education, higher ed and lower ed systems connecting and working together. And, Ted, I'd love to stay in contact and connect you with the Tennessee MEP because you got a hell of a one down there.
Be great. And I've not had in 20 years at UT any contact with them.
Thanks, John. And thanks, Ted. Dilip?
I think I would say the most important thing is, I think that when we hear the word chain, we always think a sequential chain, right? Sequential chain. But I think Pascal said it right? It's a network. It's an ecosystem. I would say the first thing that I would say, if you're a supply chain leader, is look at the ecosystem in which your supply chain exists today, right? Because it's not in isolation, right? It's working with everybody else. What can you do to work with your quote unquote competition, right? What can you do to work with them to collaborate and for the betterment of both your organization, their organization, but for the planet as a whole?
Thanks, Dilip. So Pascal, you have 30 seconds to conclude.
I agree with the three. I just one, and to do that, we need data. If you don't capture your data yet, just start Monday morning. Capture your data, okay? Because this will be mandatory in order to work in ecosystem, to better understand where we have to improve, etc., etc. So data are the key. In supply chain, we in general, we know that. But if it's not yet done, just do it Monday morning.
Thank you, Pascal, for this. So we are ending now this discussion. So I hope this panel discussion brought all the right insights you were wishing to get about the supply chain of the future. So I really would like to thank you, all the panelists, and wish to all of you a good day. So thank you very much. So now you can go back to the lobby, I guess, by clicking back to the lobby on the top and left corner of the page. It's correct. Thank you. Bye-bye, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.